So, our goal for today is to take a look at calculating the gross domestic product of the United States. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at slides 1 through 10. We're going to take a look at an article on the trade deficit. And if there's time, there is a video that we could take a look at that may actually talk about why a trade deficit is a good thing. So, we will take a look at that here in just a moment. But first of all, we have to understand what we're studying. All right. In microeconomics, which is the unit we just finished, microeconomics focuses on the simple things, individual things like studies people's individual income. Okay, how much does one person make versus another person, as opposed to looking at an entire economy or an entire country as to how much a country makes. How do individuals make money, and what do they spend money on, and so on. They take a look at the demand and supply of labor. That's what we talked about: labor unions, labor rights, what is good for labor, and what's bad for labor. Takes a look at the actual decisions made with households and firms. All right. What kind of decisions do companies make, and what impact can that have on the economy? What decisions do households make? And this goes back to kind of like supply and demand, where we talked about like what's going to turn someone off from buying pizzas. Well, if the price gets too high, we're going to stop. If the price goes too low, we're going to start or continue spending money. We talked about price of complementary or substitute items. If peanut butter goes on sale, people are going to buy more jelly. Did the price of jelly change? No, not at all. All right. Think about things that can be substituted for each other. Would be like if the price of butter goes through the roof, people are going to buy more margarine. Even though the price didn't change of margarine, it can be substituted. Microeconomics studies the individual prices of certain commodities. And again, like we talked about before, looks at the demand and supply of goods. When we get into macroeconomics, now it's a much bigger picture. All right. Now we're taking a look at national income as a country. We're looking at as how many people in that country or in an economy are employed. All right, deals with larger decisions, aggregate decisions, meaning like the decisions that everyone in Silicon Valley makes. We're not looking at just one company, but like an entire industry. How do all those people make decisions? Big decisions would be like airlines. When airlines decide to have a price war, when it's time to buy flights or purchase airline tickets, that's something that we would look at in macroeconomics, is what's the entire industry doing. Do we want to study overall price levels? All right. Take a look at the overall price over history. What's happened to a gallon of gasoline? What's happened to the price of a loaf of bread, and so on. Economists call that a market basket. And then again, with demand and supply, now they're looking at big picture. The economists no longer care about your peanut butter and your jelly. Now they're looking at millions of people grocery shopping, and what are the trends. They can analyze things like a Black Friday sale. Okay, Black Friday is not a limited sale in one town. It's now actually a global phenomenon, believe it or not, and people analyze it that way. So the question we must ask ourselves is, how do we calculate a country's worth? And that is calculated through what's called gross domestic product. All right. And the formula for it is incredibly simple. It's going to look like a little bit of an algebra problem. But again, what we're trying to do is to find out the total amount, gross, that we produce product at home in the United States or in a country. Domestic means in a country. Okay. So when you take gross domestic product, you're taking a look at what do we produce in total as a country. All right. And the formula for it is C plus I plus G plus the difference of X minus M. All right. C plus I plus G plus the difference of X minus M. Now, all of this is going to make more sense in just a minute. All right. And again, we're taking a look at the entire economy. All right, the C. The C of the formula stands for consumption. All right, consumption. The idea of consumption is what do we as consumers consume? All right, the root word of consumer and consumption is to consume. What do we consume? Think of all the things that we consume in the course of a day. Or in the course of a year. Think about clothing that eventually wears out. All right. Think about food that you eat, the gasoline that goes into your vehicle, toys that kids play with and then get sick of or grow up out of. Consumption and the way consumption works is that it's the final products. It is the final products that people purchase. Does not include intermediate products. So let me explain this. All right. Final products are the things that you are going to buy and use on your own at your house. All right. Case in point, you go to the grocery store, you buy pizza sauce, you buy ground sausage, you buy cheese, you buy dough, and you make a pizza and you eat it. All right. Maybe you go buy a frozen pizza. Maybe you buy one of those, ready to bake things like at a Papa Murphy's or something along those lines. Those are things that you're consuming. You're the final consumer and you are going to have them. Another great example would be tires. Okay. You go to Fleet Farm, you buy tires for your vehicle and you put them on. All right. When you put the tires on your vehicle, you are going to consume them. Eventually, the rubber is going to wear off and you're going to have to buy new ones. The idea is that it's not something that you are going to in turn use to make for someone else. All right. Consumption means that you are going to use it yourself. So let's say GM, General Motors, or Ford, they go out and they buy tires. They buy tires all the time, but they're not the final customer. They're not going to use those tires. They are going to put those tires on vehicles, but the wear and tear on the tires are going to be from the consumer. So that's a middle product. That's an intermediate product. That's something that they're going to buy, and then they're going to turn it around and sell it for something else. Okay? Think of your parents maybe going to the grocery store to buy flour around Christmas to bake cookies. Okay, you're going to buy a bag of flour and a bag of sugar, and you're going to use those things to bake cookies. A bakery is going to buy flour and sugar, but they are going to use them as intermediate products to produce baked goods that they are going to sell in their store. All right. So like we talked about, bread in a bakery, flour for a bakery versus a bag of flour that you're going to use at home. Okay. The I stands for investment. All right. What does investment mean, Mr. Klein? This is anything companies, factories, stores do to invest in their business. Okay. So for example, I worked for Schneider National Trucking for many years. Okay. And at Schneider, what they did is when I was there, they were just in the process of putting GPS units on their trucks. And that way they can trace their trucks. They were the tractors, the driving part of the truck. However, they also started experimenting on putting GPS devices on their trailers because they were losing their trailers. If a driver wrote down the wrong number of the trailer that he delivered somewhere, the company may never know where it is again if they wrote down the wrong number and they lose the trailer. The trailer just sits there till the end of time on some lot and never gets picked up again. So Schneider started buying new computers. They started buying new GPS systems. They started buying new trailers that were wired with batteries so that the GPS unit could use it, or maybe they use solar panels or whatever. All those things were made to make their business better, to serve their customers better. All right. Because there's nothing more frustrating than like when Ford calls up Schneider and says, we need auto parts. And Schneider says, we would, but we're out of trailers. That would drive companies nuts. So now with investment, by investing in your infrastructure, you're building new trailers, you're building new trucks, you're buying new GPS units. All of those things are helping your business. All right. So computers in a place, new machinery, whatever. Okay. The G The G stands for government. All right. Government spending. Anything the government spends money on. What are some things the government spends money on? Well, they have to buy things like bullets. They have to build schools. They have to build highway systems. They have to build aircraft carriers. That's where the bullets go. They buy police cars and they buy fire engines. So all of these things are being purchased by the government. Think of the number of stop signs in Green Bay alone. The government has to put those stop signs up, which means they have to buy the metal and they have to, cut them in an octagonal shape, and they have to paint it red and put the white letters on it and all of those things. So anything purchased by the government counts towards GDP. All right. Anything purchased by the government counts towards GDP. And that's a good thing. All right. Because it shows that we are able to invest in ourselves. Anytime the government buys something, it helps our economy because they're buying a brand new fire engine. Well, who makes those fire engines? Well, if you look at the front here, it's Pierce. Pierce Manufacturing in Appleton makes this fire engine, and we sell them, or they sell them, all around the world. So every time they do that, it's an investment in our country. So government spending is a positive. So let's review real quick. We have consumption, which is anything that we as end users buy. All right. We buy, earphones for our telephones, and we buy, iPads and stuff like that. And that wears out. We buy new cell phones every couple of years or every few years. So all those things. Then investment, things that the government makes. All right. Or sorry, anything that companies do to invest in themselves. And then finally, again, the government. All right. All their government spending. Now, the X stands for exports. Now, why did they use the X and not the E for the acronym or for the formula? Because of the next one. You can't, there's already used an I and for investment, so you can't use the I for imports. They have to use the second letter. So to make it easier, they just use the second letter of both X minus M. All right. The X here are things that are shipped that we make them in our country, but then we ship them out to other countries. And that's good for us, because think of it like as a store. If we're selling it, people are giving us cash for it, and we are getting rid of the products that we're making to other people. So the goods go out of the United States. We ship corn all around the world. We ship medical equipment all around the world. We ship airplanes. We make huge airplanes. Boeing is based in the United States. All of those things we manufacture in this country, we sell to other countries, and we get money in return. So exports help a country, like we said, airplanes, medical equipment, etc. Okay. Now imports, which is the M, because again, we're using the second letter here. Imports are the only things that hurt us in our formula for GDP. If you look at the formula of GDP, C plus I plus G, plus the difference of X minus M, the only thing that hurts us is the imports. Why? Because these are things we cannot produce ourselves. And that's bad for economists. They look at us and say that's bad. Those are things we can't produce. We have to give our money away to other countries to bring these things in. Now, why do we import things? Because we can't necessarily grow them. Okay. Or we can't produce them. It doesn't make sense, or we just don't have that raw material or that natural resource necessary. Perfect example: coffee, chocolate, bananas. All right. We don't have the climate to grow those things. So it makes far more sense for us to buy them from other countries. And in a little while, in the next unit, we're going to talk more about why comparative versus absolute advantage, why we want to make some things ourselves and why we want other countries to make them. But the fact is, we don't grow coconuts really well in the United States. All right. Sony, this is a Japanese company that has revolutionized technology. Now, it's not that we can't make flat screen TVs ourselves. It's just that sometimes other countries are much better at it. They could do it at a cheaper price. They have the infrastructure in place, and they do it. So we buy those things from other countries. So here's what I want to do here. Again, make sure you get down this bottom part. Imports hurt a country's GDP. All right. You want to make sure you get that in your notes. We're going to go and practice now. What we want to do is we want to practice. So I'm going to give you that information. Go back in your notes. And yes, you can use a calculator. Yes, you can use the calculator on your cell phone if you like. But go ahead and figure out the GDP for this fictitious country. And Mr. Wittig can pause here and come back to me here in a little bit if he needs to. All right, so we figured out the C plus I plus G plus X minus M. And what we have found out, hopefully, if you answered it properly, the answer should be $730 billion. Okay? So again, this is just kind of a made-up country. These are in billions of dollars. Gives you an idea of how to calculate. Now, I'm going to ask you to do it one more time with me. All right? Let's practice this one more time. And I'm going to give you some new numbers this time. This time, they're all going to be in trillions of dollars. Now, there's a decimal point, so I know I need you to, go to that extra decimal point. But what you're going to calculate here is, again, all of these are in trillions of dollars. Go ahead and calculate the wealth of this country. And again, Mr. Wittig can stop the player here if you would like and give you guys a chance to do this. All right. If you answered this correctly, you came up with $20.86 trillion. The interesting thing about this is that this is actually the current GDP of the United States as of December of last year. And the interesting thing about this is we can actually click on this. And what this should do, if everything works properly, it will take you to the information here will take you to the gross domestic product and income. And we can go right here to gross domestic product. Okay, this is from the Bureau of Economic Analysis. This is from the Commerce Department. This is an executive branch office. And if you take a look here, this is where I got those numbers. It looks confusing, but it's not. GDP is $20.86 trillion in quarter four. Okay, remember, in a year, there are 4 quarters. That means there's 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. So this is the first 3 months, the second 3 months, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. So at the end of the year, they obviously haven't calculated the first quarter of 2019 yet, but the Bureau of Economic Analysis has calculated our country's GDP at $20.86 trillion. Here is the C, 14.188 personal consumption. This is your consumption. Now, they go into more detail. They start talking about durable goods versus non-durable goods, services. Remember we talked about the differences between goods and services? All of those things. All right. Next, gross private domestic investment. All right. Once again, the total of private companies in the United States investing. This is the I, C plus I plus G, 3.766, all right? And again, they talk about fixed investments, non-residential structures, equipment, intellectual property rights, things like movie copyrights and books that people write and music, etc., residential, change in private inventories, etc. They break this up. But again, it's just the I. Here, they skip ahead a little bit. They go right to the exports and imports. The exports are right here, okay? And if you take a look over here, you're at 2.54 trillion. All right. And that is, you have to subtract away the imports, $3.199 trillion. Now, this is important. This is what's called a trade deficit. We are exporting less than we're importing, and that's bad. That's why our X minus M is a negative number, because 2.54 trillion, subtract away 3.199 trillion, and you are going to have a negative number. All right. Finally, government consumption. All right. This is the stuff the government buys when they buy schools for a computer, when they buy bullets for police officers or for the military or uniforms. They are spending $3.5 trillion a year. So when you figure out those numbers that I gave you, it should work out to $20.86 trillion is our country's GDP. What I'm going to ask Mr. Wittig to do now is to scroll back up to the very beginning of this, back to the learning target. All right. Sorry, we're just going to scroll back through this real quickly. And if we go all the way back to the beginning, there is an article here. I would like you guys, this will be linked in Google Classroom. Just go right to the stream. All right. In Google Classroom, I want you to read this. President Trump had promised at one point to get rid of the trade deficit. But if we go back to that data on that chart, the trade deficit is actually getting bigger. Okay. This would be a zero trade deficit. And this is how big it is. Okay. We're at negative $621 billion as of last year. All right. This is our trade deficit right now. And as you can see, President Trump took office in 2016, and I'm sorry, January of 2017. And this is the trade deficit. It keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay. Now, don't get me wrong. It hasn't been great under a lot of presidents. President George W. Bush, all right, was president until 2008. When President Obama came in, he drastically dropped the trade deficit. A lot of that was because of a recession, though. And then it expanded, contracted, expanded, et cetera. So all presidents struggle with this. What they're trying to point out here is that the president, promised that they were going to try to get rid of the deficit, and that hasn't happened. And then when you finish this article, maybe Mr. Wittig can ask you a couple questions, and then I want you to take a look at this video as to whether or not what if a trade deficit is a good thing? Maybe a trade deficit isn't a bad thing, and maybe that's President Trump's plan all along. And if you click on this video, it will show you that. This video, Mr. Wittig will put on for you. And that's it for today. So nice job, guys, and thank you for your time and attention.